The US loves to flex its wealth. Record stock markets, tech billionaires, Instagram influencers buying fourth homes. But just past the highway billboards and stadium lights are towns where the American dream didn't just die, it decomposed and nobody bothered to bury it. These aren't outliers. Well, these aren't economically distressed areas waiting for their comeback story. These are places that got used up, wrung out, and left to rot while the rest of America moved on and pretended not to notice. Today, we're going deep into 10 towns that prove poverty in America isn't just about money. It's about being erased from the national conversation entirely. Some of these places have homes selling for less than a used Honda. Others have infrastructure so broken that diseases from the 1800s are making a comeback. One town has 38 residents and 0 functioning sewers in 2026. You think you know American poverty? You don't. Not yet. By the end of this, you'll see things differently. You'll understand why a $15,000 house isn't a bargain. It's a warning label. And you'll realize that for millions of Americans, the gap between survival and collapse is one medical bill, one factory closure, one policy decision made by people who will never set foot in these zip codes. We're starting with 4 towns you probably haven't heard of. Then we'll hit the ones even the news forgot to cover. Fair warning, this gets dark. But ignoring it doesn't make it go away. It just makes you complicit in the silence. Hit subscribe if you want to see what's really happening when America isn't looking. And if you make it to the end, drop a comment on which town shocked you most. Let's go. Number 10. Gary, Indiana. There's a town in America where Michael Jackson learned to moonwalk. Now the only thing still moving is people leaving. This is Gary, Indiana, a place where the American dream didn't fade away. It died in a steel mill, and nobody even played taps. Here are the numbers that matter. The median home price sits between $27,000 and $35,000. That is not a down payment. That is the entire house. Gary's population collapsed from 178,000 in 1960 to under 70,000 today, a 61% evacuation. More than a third of the city lives in poverty. Violent crime consistently ranks among the highest in America, and over 6,000 buildings sit abandoned. That is not a metaphor. 6,000 structures sit empty and rotting. Gary was built in 1906 by U.S. Steel as a company town. At its peak, it produced steel for skyscrapers, cars, and warships. These were union jobs with blue-collar wages, the kind of work that built the American middle class. Then globalization arrived. The mills closed. Jobs evaporated. White flight turned into everyone flight. And what replaced the steel industry? Nothing. Nothing sustainable, nothing lasting. Gary became a case study in what happens when a city's entire economic foundation disappears and nobody bothers to build a new one. Here's the cruel irony. Michael Jackson, one of the most successful entertainers in human history, was born here in 1950. His childhood home on Jackson Street still stands, barely. Meanwhile, you can buy a 3-bedroom house in Gary for less than what Michael spent on a single pair of stage gloves. Driving through the city today feels like touring an apocalypse that happened in slow motion. Entire blocks are now empty lots where homes used to be. The City Methodist Church, a stunning Gothic structure from the 1920s, sits abandoned with shattered windows and a collapsing roof. It has become a pilgrimage site for photographers chasing aesthetic decay, while actual residents live in neighborhoods where streetlights do not work, and police response times are measured in whether they show up at all. One local summed it up perfectly. Gary has 2 kinds of buildings, abandoned and about to be. You can buy a house here for the price of a used Camry. Congratulations. You now own property in a city where the biggest economic activity is stripping copper from abandoned buildings. And if you think the collapse of a steel town is tragic, wait until you see what happens when workers are forced to choose between survival and nothing at all. Number 9. Bessemer, Alabama. There is a town in America where workers making $15 an hour walk up to 12 miles a day inside a warehouse, then vote no to anyone offering help. Bessemer, Alabama did not reject a union. It rejected the idea that things could ever get better. Welcome to number 9. Here is the reality behind the headlines. Median home prices range from $35,000 to $45,000. That is roughly what a single year of rent costs in Seattle. Median household income sits around $32,000, nearly $17,000 below the national average. The poverty rate is 26%, almost double the national rate. Unemployment consistently runs above both state and national averages with limited options beyond retail work and warehouses. Bessemer used to make steel. U.S. Steel opened a plant here in 1887, and for decades this was a union town with middle-class wages, benefits, and pensions. Then, the mills closed in the 1970s and 80s. For years afterward, nothing meaningful replaced them. That changed in 2020 when Amazon built BHM1, a massive fulfillment center. The city celebrated. Jobs were back. Economic revival was promised. Bessemer even offered Amazon generous tax breaks to seal the deal. But here is what rarely gets discussed. Amazon did not save Bessemer, it occupied it. Between February and April of 2021, the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union attempted to organize the Amazon warehouse. The effort drew national attention. Politicians flew in. Media cameras followed. This was supposed to be a defining moment for the future of organized labor. The result was clear. By a vote of 1,798 to 738, workers voted against unionizing. Amazon's response followed a familiar playbook. Mandatory anti-union meetings were held. Text messages were sent directly to workers' phones. Bathroom stalls were covered with anti-union flyers. The company even lobbied local officials to change traffic light timing outside the warehouse so organizers could not speak with workers during shift changes. A mailbox was installed inside the parking lot, monitored, and workers were encouraged to vote there. What often gets ignored is why the vote failed. Workers did not vote no because they trusted Amazon. They voted no because they feared losing the only jobs available. When poverty becomes structural, exploitation begins to resemble security. The cost becomes clearer when you look at the numbers. During the same period as the union vote, Jeff Bezos made roughly $13 billion in a single day. At the same time, Bessemer workers were being written up for bathroom breaks lasting longer than 3 minutes. You can buy a house in Bessemer for less than the price of a Tesla Model 3, but what you are really buying into is a town where the largest employer pays wages low enough to qualify workers for food assistance while branding the arrangement as opportunity. Bessemer is not ignorant. Bessemer is what happens when a system conditions people to vote against hope, because hope has a long history of never showing up. And if corporate unions' suppression feels bleak, the next town shows what happens when government neglect turns into something even worse. Number 8. Flint, Michigan. There's a city in America where government officials decided that saving money mattered more than not poisoning children. 10 years later, the pipes are still not fully fixed, but the bills are still being sent, and Flint, Michigan is still waiting for someone to apologize and mean it. Here are the numbers they would rather you forget. Median home prices range from $25,000 to $40,000. You can buy a house for the price of a decent used car. Flint's population collapsed from nearly 200,000 in 1960 to under 82,000 today. Almost 37% of residents live in poverty. Between 2014 and 2019, thousands of children were exposed to dangerous levels of lead. The damage is permanent. Flint was once a General Motors company town known as Vehicle City. In the 1970s, it had stable jobs, strong unions, and pensions. Then, GM downsized, factories closed, and the city's tax base collapsed. In 2011, the state of Michigan appointed an emergency manager to take control of Flint's finances. 3 years later, in an effort to cut costs, the city switched its water source from Detroit's system to the Flint River. The water was not treated properly. Lead leached from aging pipes into the drinking supply. Residents complained immediately about brown water, rashes, and hair loss. Officials insisted the water was safe. 18 months passed before the truth was admitted. Flint's water was poisoning its own residents. By then, thousands of children had already been exposed to lead, causing irreversible developmental and neurological damage. Today, some pipes have been replaced, but not all. Many residents still do not trust the water. Bottled water is still distributed. Most criminal charges against officials were dropped or reduced, and Flint residents are still billed for the water that poisoned them. Living here means turning on the tap and wondering if it is safe. It means second-guessing something as basic as bathing your child. Flint learned a brutal lesson. When you are poor, your safety can be treated as a line item on a spreadsheet. And if state-level negligence feels shocking, the next town shows what happens when neglect becomes the norm. Number 7, Charleston, West Virginia. There is a state capital in America where lawmakers meet beneath a gold-domed capitol. And just a few blocks away, houses sell for $18,000 because no one wants to stay. Charleston, West Virginia is not just a city in decline. It is a preview of what happens when an industry dies. Addiction takes its place, and the people making decisions live somewhere else. On paper, the numbers almost look normal. Median home prices sit around $90,000. But drive 15 minutes outside downtown and you will find homes listed for $15,000 to $30,000, often marked cash only and sold as is. Nearly 23% of city residents live in poverty. In surrounding rural areas, that number climbs well above 30%. Charleston's population peaked at more than 85,000 in 1960. Today, it has fallen below 47,000. Charleston's story is Appalachia's story. Coal built this city. Mining jobs once paid well and supported entire communities. Then the industry mechanized. Then it collapsed. Jobs disappeared. Young people left. Many of those who stayed turned to opioids. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, prescription painkillers flooded the region. Doctors overprescribed. Pharmaceutical companies pushed aggressively. When regulations finally tightened, heroin and fentanyl filled the gap. West Virginia now has the highest overdose death rate in the country, and Charleston sits near the center of that crisis. The failure was not invisible. State leaders watched it unfold from offices just blocks away. Yet West Virginia still ranks near the bottom nationally for healthcare access, mental health services, and addiction treatment funding. Today, downtown Charleston shows signs of revival. There are breweries, a riverfront, and government buildings. Walk a mile in any direction and the picture changes. Boarded up homes, aging infrastructure, and empty streets tell a different story. This is the state capital, the place where decisions are made for millions of people, and it cannot even save itself. Buying a cheap house here does not mean opportunity. It means buying into a city where decline has become official policy. Next are the towns so small, even failure feels too ambitious. Number 6, CAIRO, Illinois. There is a town in America where the streetlights still turn on every night, as if they are waiting for people who never came back. CAIRO, Illinois sits where the Mississippi and Ohio rivers meet. On paper, that should have been destiny. In reality, it is a ghost town with a pulse. CAIRO's decline is often described as gradual, but the numbers tell a different story. The population fell from roughly 15,000 in 1920 to under 2,000 today. That is not a recession, it is an evacuation. Median home prices range from $10,000 to $25,000, yet many houses sit unsold for years because even at that price, few people want them. More than 40% of remaining residents live below the poverty line. Entire blocks are boarded up and utilities still run in places where almost no one lives. CAIRO used to matter. River trade, railroads, and factories once made it a key point in American commerce. Then shipping modernized. The rivers shifted in importance. Industries closed and jobs disappeared. People followed. But economics alone does not explain CAIRO. The town also carries one of the darkest histories of racial violence in the country. Lynchings, riots, and brutal civil rights confrontations shaped its identity. When integration arrived, white flight turned into mass evacuation. Businesses closed, services vanished, and decline fed on itself. By the 1990s, CAIRO was no longer functioning as a town. It had become a case study in what happens when economic collapse meets racial abandonment. Today, walking through CAIRO feels like stepping into a place frozen in time. Old storefront signs still hang on buildings that closed decades ago. The main street looks like a movie set after everyone went home. Housing is cheap, but there are no jobs, limited services, and the nearest functioning economy is nearly an hour away. A former resident once wrote that CAIRO feels like a town haunting itself. The silence here is heavy, not peaceful. Even the rivers seem to be passing through without stopping. You would expect a place this cheap to attract someone: developers, artists, investors. CAIRO proves something harsher. Sometimes a town disappears so completely that even opportunity looks elsewhere. Next is a place with money flowing in, just not to the people who live there. Number 5. Camden, New Jersey. Camden, New Jersey is where the American dream took a wrong turn and never recovered. Just across the Delaware River from Philadelphia, close enough to walk, sits a city that has felt stuck in economic decline since the 1980s. Camden is what happens when investment surrounds a place but never truly enters it. The numbers are hard to ignore. The median home price is around $17,000, roughly the cost of a couch in Manhattan. More than 36% of residents live in poverty. Unemployment regularly runs at about double the national average. Violent crime rates remain several times higher than the national level, and Camden has ranked among the most dangerous cities in the country for years. Only about 65% of students finish high school, and yet Camden has not been ignored by money. Since 2013, more than $2 billion in public and private investment has flowed into the city. Corporate campuses were built. The police department was expanded. A new waterfront park now faces the Philadelphia skyline. Developers received massive tax incentives to relocate. So why do so many neighborhoods still look abandoned? Because the investment passed through without stopping. Major companies moved in, collected tax breaks, and hired workers who mostly lived elsewhere. Shiny offices rose along the waterfront, while just a few blocks inland, residents still take multiple bus rides to find a grocery store that sells fresh food. Living in Camden is cheap on paper, but expensive in practice. Schools are underfunded, medical services are limited. Promises of revitalization come and go. Even buying a $20,000 house is difficult, as banks often refuse loans while predatory lenders step in. Camden is filled with contradictions. Police presence is heavy, yet basic services are scarce. New buildings rise downtown while longtime residents watch from the outside. Camden did not fail on its own. It was invested in selectively, and the people who already lived there were never the priority. And if selective investment feels frustrating, the next city shows what happens when the state takes control and still lets everything fall apart. Number 4, East St. Louis, Illinois. Just across the Mississippi River from the Gateway Arch, a national monument celebrating American expansion, sits a city where life expectancy is as much as 10 years lower than the national average. This is East St. Louis, a place that exists in the shadow of prosperity but never shares in it. East St. Louis is not simply a city in decline. It is an example of what happens when neglect becomes policy and abandonment turns into routine. The numbers sound exaggerated, but they are real. Median home prices hover around $18,000, and some houses are missing walls entirely. More than 43% of residents live in poverty. Unemployment is not just high, but generational, with jobs that vanished decades ago never returning. Violent crime rates frequently rank among the highest in the country. Basic infrastructure remains unreliable, with entire neighborhoods lacking consistent water service, functioning streetlights, or regular trash pickup. This city was once a major industrial hub. Steel mills, rail yards, and meatpacking plants provided stable work. When white flight accelerated in the 1960s and 70s, industries followed. The tax base collapsed and services began to disappear. Illinois stepped in to take control of the city's finances, a role it has maintained for decades. Yet schools, sanitation, and policing remain severely underfunded. Some public school buildings have suffered from mold and fungal growth inside classrooms. Repairs are discussed, but rarely funded. Every few years, a new revitalization plan is announced. Politicians visit, promise renewal, and leave. Conditions stay the same. Living in East St. Louis means adapting to instability. Roads are deeply damaged. Flooding is common. Entire blocks sit burned out or abandoned. From many streets, residents can see the St. Louis skyline shining just minutes away, filled with new development and luxury housing. East St. Louis did not fail on its own. It was left behind, managed from a distance, and blamed when the outcome matched the neglect. And next, our town's so small that even abandonment feels deliberate. Number 3, Allenville, Missouri. Allenville, Missouri does not have a downtown because the town was flooded out and never rebuilt. What remains is one of the smallest official towns in America that still appears on the census. The population is roughly 38 people. That is not a typo. It is fewer people than a high school classroom. Life in Allenville is defined by what is missing. Some homes list for under $6,000. Infrastructure is minimal. There is no proper sewer system. Electricity is limited and unreliable. Roads are in such poor condition that even reaching the town feels uncertain. There are no real businesses, no services, and almost no local employment. Jobs exist, mostly in name. Allenville did not shrink because it lacked natural beauty. It shrank because it lacked attention. Flooding here is not a one-time disaster. It happens repeatedly. Each flood damages what little infrastructure exists, and each time the water recedes, long-term investment fails to arrive. Local officials have applied for grants, requested mitigation funds, and proposed levees and drainage projects. Larger, nearby towns with stronger political influence consistently receive priority. Allenville is left to fade. Cheap housing here is often mistaken for opportunity. In reality, it comes with hidden costs. Residents live without consistent sanitation. Power outages are common. Roads deteriorate faster than they can be repaired. Isolation adds another burden, with the nearest grocery store roughly 30 minutes away. Silence defines the town, not peaceful silence, but the absence of activity, services, and possibility. A former resident once described Allenville as a place that slowly erases itself. The truth is uncomfortable. A town with more land than people has fewer opportunities than ever. Allenville is not rural charm or off-grid freedom. It is what happens when a place becomes too small to matter and too costly to fix. And if a town of 38 people without sewers seems shocking, the next place reveals a problem even older and harder to ignore. Number 2, Whitehall, Alabama. Whitehall, Alabama has a sanitation problem so severe that doctors linked it to confirmed cases of hookworm as recently as 2023. Hookworm is a parasitic disease most Americans associate with the early 20th century, not modern rural communities. This is not quirky country living. It is infrastructure failure turning into a medical condition. The numbers tell the story. Median home prices hover around $19,000, sometimes less. Nearly 40% of residents live in poverty, with surrounding county rates even higher. Unemployment regularly exceeds state and national averages. Healthcare access is limited, with few clinics, scarce specialists, and long travel times to reach a full hospital. These conditions are not accidental. They are the result of long-term neglect. Whitehall sits in Lowndes County, one of the poorest counties in the United States. Many homes lack functioning septic systems. When toilets fail, raw sewage pools in yards and around homes. In 2017, researchers found that more than 30% of residents had been exposed to hookworm, a parasite spread through contact with contaminated soil and human waste. The disease thrives where sanitation does not exist. State and federal programs technically exist to address rural infrastructure problems. Grants, loans, and emergency funds are available on paper. In practice, they rarely reach places like Whitehall. Applications compete against towns with larger tax bases, stronger political representation, and more administrative resources. Whitehall repeatedly falls to the bottom of the list. The town has been studied, documented, and reported on. It has appeared in academic journals, health reports, and national media. Yet little has changed. Toilets still back up. Roads remain unpaved. Promised solutions never arrive. Documentation does not lead to intervention. Living in Whitehall may look affordable at first glance, but the hidden costs add up quickly. Septic systems fail. Water quality remains uncertain. Jobs are scarce. Health risks include diseases most Americans thought were eradicated generations ago. What appears cheap is often a liability disguised as opportunity. Whitehall did not choose this outcome. It was effectively chosen by a system that decided small, poor, and remote communities could be ignored. And if modern hookworm in America feels unreal, the next town shows what neglect looks like when hope itself never had a chance to arrive. Number 1. Gloucester, Mississippi. If America keeps pretending places like this do not exist, Gloucester is the future. Quieter, cheaper, and easier to ignore. Gloucester, Mississippi is number 1, not because it ranks worst in every category, but because it shows how neglect actually works. The town does not riot. It does not trend. It does not make headlines. It simply fades. The reality is stark. The population sits around 850 and has been shrinking for decades. Median home prices range from $13,000 to $18,000, with some houses selling for less than a used lawn tractor. Nearly half the population lives in poverty. The local job market barely exists beyond gas stations, dollar stores, and nearby correctional facilities. There is no grocery store, no pharmacy, and no dentist. Basic healthcare requires driving. Gloucester was once a timber town. When the mills closed, the economic reason for staying disappeared. Mississippi already ranks near the bottom nationally in health outcomes, income, education funding, and infrastructure. Gloucester starts from that baseline and then falls further. This is a rural, majority black town with a shrinking tax base. It did not lose investment. It never received it. Federal programs for rural development exist on paper, but they favor places with grant writers, matching funds, and political influence. Gloucester has none of those. The most consistent nearby investment has been prisons, not schools, not clinics, not broadband. When incarceration becomes the main economic anchor, the future stops being built. Cheap living here comes with hidden costs, long drives for basic needs, limited emergency care, few jobs, and fewer exits. One resident explained it simply. People do not leave because they hate Gloucester. They leave because there is nothing to grow into. Gloucester matters because it forces a question America avoids. What do we owe places that capital has decided are not worth saving? Gloucester did not fail. It was allowed to disappear. And there are hundreds of towns just like it, fading quietly while the system works exactly as designed.